Welcome to Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio.
So I'm announcing today that I will not be seeking re-election at the end of my term.
Senator Dick Durbin made quite an announcement this week. The Democratic whip said it's time to pass the torch after 44 years in Congress. Almost right away, he hopped on a plane to the Vatican for Pope Francis's funeral. We're so pleased he will be joining us today, Senator.
It's going to be good to have Senator Durbin on. Senator Durbin's been a person who's been in the Senate for a long, long time. And here's the deal: he will be missed as he leaves the Senate and goes back into the private sector. But the bottom line is Dick took a assessment of where he was in life and where he was in the United States Senate. And even though he could continue to do good things in the Senate, he said, "Now it's time to let somebody else do it for a while." And I think that's a very, very good sign. I mean, I watched Robert C. Byrd, and I watched Senator Cochran, and I watched Senator Feinstein, and all those folks stayed too long, and that's never a good thing. And Dick watched all that too, and he said, "You know what? It's time to go home and be with my wife Loretta and enjoy life a bit." But it'd be good to get his perspective on where we are today and where we've gone. And as Congress, I've talked many, many times on this podcast about how Congress really doesn't even count anymore. And we'll get Dick's views on that. He may or may not agree with me.
Yeah, and Senator Jean Shaheen too, after she was on our podcast, announced she's not running for reelection. So maybe a new trend we are seeing. We'll chat with him. We have a lot. it's a it's a broken record. We have a lot of headlines to get.
Yes.
So
Yes.
many, I don't have room for all of them. But let's start here. Congress gets back to work today. In protest, your friend, Senator Cory Booker, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries held a more than 12-hour sit-in on the Capitol steps on Sunday. They live streamed this whole thing. They were joined by other guests, and the whole purpose was to protest Trump's budget proposals. They say they're calling for action to protect Medicaid, food assistance, other safety net programs. We'll get into this more in the next couple of weeks, but they're really concerned about those programs.
Yeah. Look, I think that when it comes to the budget, it's got to be a budget that works. It's got to be a budget that works for folks who need help. It's got to be a budget that works for our national defense, and that's really the bottom line. I do think Booker's into extended stays. I mean, what, he was 25 hours on the United States Senate talking about the challenges that this administration has put forth to the American people. And that's being kind when I say it that way. But the truth is that he got people's attention, and then we saw him on the steps yesterday. Just pointing out to people what the challenges are out there, and how we need to deal with them in a common sense way moving forward. And I appreciate his leadership for sure.
I think up next, we're going to see him hop on one of those flights to space and, go longer than those women.
Well, what I really like him to do is come out the farm because we're running 14, 16, 18-hour days on the tractor, and so I don't really want him to drive though because he'll break stuff, and then I'll have to wear this shirt, you know.
I like it. Yeah, well, this shirt that he's wearing, if you're just listening to the podcast, says, "I am here because you broke something." And I have a feeling we'll talk more about that shirt later. Okay, a lot of polls talked about over the weekend. A new Washington Post, ABC News Ipsos poll shows Trump has the lowest 100-day job approval rating of any president in the last 80 years. 39% of people polled said they approve of how he's doing as president, 55% disapproval. But while we're talking polls, this one has gotten a lot of jokes. A separate YouGov poll on the Middle Ages showed 9% of respondents were very or somewhat favorable of the Black Plague. So what does that say?
It doesn't say it's not good. It was Black Plague is exactly what it is, But look, if you take a look at some of the things that went down the pipe in the last 4 months or so. I can see why his numbers are down. I actually wonder why they're at 39% among some, because the truth is this: as we watch, money being pulled away from people because of political reasons, as we watch people's due process taken away, as we watch our military people give away foreign secrets and work on classified information on unprotected lines, as we watch the president push away our allies in the country and embrace dictatorships around the globe. All this kind of stuff leads to a weaker America, not a greater America. And so we should be talking about those kind of things out and let people know what really has made this country great. Now, I'm going to also tell you this: some of the things he's done to our allies, I don't know can ever be repaired, quite honestly, and that's a problem long term for this country.
Yeah, we will touch on the economy in just a moment, but so many eye-catching stories on immigration. The ACLU and other organizations say 3 children who are U.S. citizens were deported to Honduras with their mothers last week. That included a 4-year-old with cancer. Their lawyers say the women were detained during routine check-ins with officials in Louisiana. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was, on the Sunday shows, and he said that everyone on U.S. soil is entitled to due process, but then went ahead and said those children were only deported because their mothers were here illegally and they didn't want to separate them. But what's not being addressed here, like you just talked about, is this lack of due process. So one of the lawyers for these women said her clients were deported within 24 hours of being detained without any access to their lawyer. We have another case out of Whitefish, Montana from late last week where Border Patrol agents arrested a 33-year-old man from Venezuela who advocates say is here legally under a parole program that allowed him to be here with a sponsor. Now, the White House wants to end the program, but a judge blocked that effort earlier this month. But regardless, he's in an ICE detention facility this morning. So a lot, a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to talk about and a lot to pay attention to because as we see these things happening, um, it it could be anybody next. I mean, it could literally be anybody because when due process isn't applied across the board, um, then who knows when it's not going to be applied to everybody, whether you're born here or naturalized citizen or somebody who came here legally. And, even folks who the claim is they're part of a drug circuit, they need due process, and if they're found to be guilty, then kick their ass out and put them in anywhere you wanna go with them. But the truth is that if they're not guilty and you kick them out of this country and you put them in a foreign prison, that's real, that's not justice, and that's not how this country was designed at all.
That brings us to this next story because USA Today obtained a memo that shows the Trump administration claims to grant authority for law enforcement officers to enter anybody they deem a suspected alien enemy to enter their house, their home, if circumstances render it impracticable to get a warrant first. So, in other words, they can just go right in without a warrant and say, you're suspected of being here illegally. Now, the memo says immigrants deemed alien enemies are not entitled to a hearing, appeal, or judicial review. Immigration advocates say they think this will be challenged in court.
Well, it should be because it's absolutely contrary to the Constitution of the United States of America, and, that means anybody. That means anybody can be suspected of being or housing somebody, and the police can literally come through your door and go through your house. That's illegal. That's just flat goddamn illegal, and it should not be allowed to have happen. The question is this? So Maureen says, if they can't get legal representation, they come in, they grab them, they throw them in a car, they haul them off and ship them out to El Salvador. Um, this is just crazy stuff. I mean, who would have ever thunk that we'd be in this kind of a situation right now? And it's, people gonna say, "Well, this isn't happening." Well, there's airplanes and airplanes of people going out, as you've already pointed out in many of these podcasts, that shows that, quite frankly, this is happening, and so we need to be aware of it.
And then we get to this story. Pam Bondi, the attorney general, promised the prosecution of judges who go against the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration. So the feds actually arrested a sitting judge in Milwaukee on Friday who they say helped an undocumented immigrant. Now, the FBI says Judge Hannah Dugan escorted an undocumented defendant in her courtroom out of a jury door when she found out that ICE agents there to arrest him, but only had an administrative warrant, not a judicial warrant. Now, the agents eventually did arrest him, but this opens a whole new can of worms to allow immigration enforcement in places that have been previously seen as off limits, like courthouses, schools, and places of worship.
Yeah, and, no checks and balances. Just none whatsoever. If you don't like what a judge is doing, we're gonna prosecute you, take away that check, and, we're gonna do what we want, and, nobody's gonna stop us, and we're not gonna give due process, and, the list goes on and on and on. And, not only unfortunate, but very, very, very dangerous, very dangerous.
Okay, let's get back to the economy. Retail stores sounding the alarm about the potential for empty store shelves and supply chain issues like we saw during the pandemic because of these tariffs on China. Many companies have already canceled orders because of the 145% tariff on Chinese imports. And the National Retail Federation says it expects imports to drop by 20% by the second half of the year if this continues.
Yeah, it's gonna cause some supply challenges, and what I've said before is if this was about opening China up so that they would take more of our products, certainly can't argue with that, that's not a bad thing, but you don't start out by going to the G7 and calling all our traditional allies in the world a bunch of bad people and embracing Putin and Xi Jinping and then expect our allies to help us open up China. If we're just fighting this fight alone, by the way, Japan, South Korea, and China already have an agreement, so they're not going to be pushing to open up. But they've got their agreement. A lot of these businesses, like farm agriculture, who's being hit from input side, increased tariffs, export side, export markets are absolutely money for folks in production agriculture. If you don't have them, it'll drive prices down. There's no doubt about it. And now the cost of repairs, if you go do your own stuff and you go buy some equipment and it happens to be built somewhere other than the United States of America, probably for a good reason because we don't have that manufacturing here and probably never will because we pay our workers a reasonable amount of money and these other countries do not, then we got a problem. And it'll put some people out of business. Although on the other side, I will also tell you for full disclosure, got a check from the federal government the other day. To help offset some of the low prices in agriculture. As I've said before, not where farmers should be getting their checks, they should be getting it from the marketplace. But when you're driving the marketplace prices down because of bad economic, in this case, tariff policy, this is what has to happen. Taxpayers have to open up the checkbooks to keep these folks alive. Otherwise, they'll go broke. And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I saw one interview yesterday, and it was this man who I think he meant he imported dog harnesses, and he said, "If I wanted to open a factory to make these myself, all of the materials and supplies would come from overseas to build that factory." So it's not just this easy fix. Let's just do a little bit of a mixed bag to finish up our headlines here. President Trump had a bit of a posting frenzy yesterday. At one point, he called Act Blue, the Democratic fundraising arm, a scam. Then he went on a rant about bringing back Columbus Day, accusing Democrats of destroying the reputation of Christopher Columbus and all of the Italians that love him. He also accused Democrats of paying people to infiltrate town halls. Of Republican town halls and calling for the politicians to have any disruptors ejected immediately. He says there is no dissension in the Republican Party and only love and unity. I also didn't mention this, what's happening when some of the museums, the, you know, the removal of some Black history exhibits like the Woolworths counter because officials say exhibits that overemphasize America's flaws need to go.
Well, as he's dealing with Act Blue and as he's dealing with those exhibits and as he's dealing with this and that, I just wish he had worked to reduce the price of eggs like he promised during the campaign because they haven't dropped a damn bit. And that was a big issue during the campaign. It's interesting how that issue's gone away now and nobody's talking about the price of eggs. In fact, what, we're a week out from Easter? Damn near broke me, all those Easter eggs we ended up it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that the president of the United States, the head of this country is spending time talking about stuff that, quite frankly, in the overall scheme of things, ain't that important. During the campaign, I swear to God, eggs were the most important thing out there. And eggs are more expensive now than they were the 20th of January.
Well, I think they used 30,000 real eggs in the White House Easter egg roll this year also.
That's good. Maybe that's why they're driving up the prices because of the Easter egg. Well, we've got an incredible honor today to have the Senate whip, Senate Democratic whip on the call today, and his name is Dick Durbin. He's been around, I'd say, for a long time, but I'm just going to say forever, Dick. You've been around forever, and the fact is that you announced this week that you were hanging up your cleats in the United States Senate, and I'm going to tell you something. Having worked with you, I think that you're a top flight individual and did great work in the Senate. And I can tell you that I know that that decision was not easy, but from where I'm sitting, it was the right decision because you've spent over half your life, as you pointed out in your video, serving in Congress, and you've done your time. You've done what you can do to keep this country the greatest country on earth. And you got 2 more years left, and we expected big things out of you over the next nearly 2 years. But I want to personally say, from my perspective, from a Montana guy, I just want to thank you for everything you've done for most of my adult life, by the way, in Congress and particularly the United States Senate. And what a pleasure it was to serve with you. It's good to have you on.
John, I miss you and Shar. You were an important part of the Senate for years. Occasionally, we would be on the opposite sides of an issue. But having said that, 9 times out of 10, I thought this is one stand-up fella who casts votes that are not designed for his reelection, but what he really believes. And time and again, you would tell me privately, if this costs me my Senate seat, that's the way it goes. I'm going to do what I think is right. We miss that in the Senate now. I'm glad you're still reaching out to the public through this podcast. And my decision to retire, I said at one point, I want to be able to walk out the front door rather than be carried out the back door at that stage in my Senate career. So that was part of my decision as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's a fact. I mean, the truth is that we all don't know the names. I've said them before that stayed longer than they probably should have, and not stayed longer than they probably should have, stayed longer than they should have. And the fact is you've got I brought up your Wikipedia page, Dick. It's about 6 miles long, by the way. I was gonna. I
That's
want,
why I got a press secretary.
it's incredible all the work that you've done. But anyway, I think let's get right to it. I see you've got a suntan today. That must mean that you were in Rome over the weekend, doing a little sunbathing. Is that true?
Well, John, there were 5 of us from the Senate and about 15 or 20 from the House who were the official delegation at Pope Francis' funeral in Vatican Square. And I will tell you, I was there, it must have been almost 20 years ago with John Paul II. And it's something that you never forget, having seen it, having been raised Catholic. There are parts of it that take me back to my childhood. Honest to God, I still remember a whole lot of Latin and a lot of Gregorian chant. I heard these rusty hinges creaking in my head, opening up the door to all that childhood and education and information. And it was a wonderful time. You know what was interesting about it, John? You'd appreciate this. 2 things I'll tell you quickly. Each one of these papal funerals is a once in a lifetime experience, now twice in a lifetime. And I remember on John Paul II, all of the Polish flags. The Polish people were so proud of his papacy, and the flags were flying in every part of the square. And was different for Francis. The spontaneous cheering and applause anytime any reference would be made to his standing up for immigrants, for poor people, and his appeal for understanding for the gay community, which was long overdue in the Catholic Church. The cheering would start in a crowd from one end to the other. The second thing is you'll like this because we both spent a lot of money on television ads. But when I went back to my hotel room in Rome, turned on the Italian TV, about every 15 minutes they ran a public service ad that just showed a picture of Francis, and below it, I'm going to get the Italian wrong, but it'll be close enough. It said, "Grazie, Francesco." Thank you, Francis. And then it said, "Il Papa della Gente," the Pope of the people. They were just showing that at all times. So I think he was a special man. I'm glad, the only Pope I ever met, and I was glad to be there.
I would say I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you remember, I think it was back in 2016, 15. that he came to the Capitol and addressed the joint session of Congress. And I remember this. I mean, I was part of leadership then. Of course, you were part of leadership then, and remember seeing the Pope, and he paid far more attention to the cooks, to the waiters, to the people who ran the elevators than he did to anybody that was in leadership. And I really respected that. And I think that's why you probably saw those ads on TV. He was a Pope of the common man.
He left his mark, and it's going to be a tough act for any person to follow. But I hope that they really try to find as close to his image and message as they possibly can.
So I want to visit with you really quick before I turn it over to Maritza. One of the things that we saw in the news over here was, and Pope's funerals are not supposed to be political at all, but we saw when Zelensky came in, the crowd went crazy. And when Trump came in, the crowd was absolutely mum. At least that's the way it came across on the TV.
Yes.
Is that fairly accurate?
Yes, I think you put your finger on it. It was spontaneous for Zelensky when he was shown on the big screen TVs that were all through the square there, and I was glad that that's the reaction, the silence for Donald Trump, because the Pope, let's be honest about it, many times was speaking directly to Donald Trump with his message when it came to immigrants and some of his policies when it came to the poor. And, we're all sinners in our own way. And I'm not holding myself out to be more moral or more Catholic or whatever it may be. But that tension did not erupt in any booing, and I'm glad it didn't.
Yeah, that is good. Maritza, I'll let you go. I can talk to Dick
You
Durbin. I can keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. Thanks for doing that. So, Dick, you were in the Senate, in the House. What total of what? How many years? 50?
43.
Oh, wait,
43?
wait. Are you moving on from Ukraine? Because I have a Ukraine question first before you
Go
go there.
ahead. You shoot. Go with Ukraine.
Okay. All right, Senator Durbin, I mean, to see President Zelensky there and to know what's happening within our country in regards to, public opinion over this war in Ukraine. You've co-founded the Senate Ukraine caucus. I mean, Senator Marco Rubio was in that caucus at one point. So did you ever imagine that when you founded that in 2015 that we would be here with the country split on whether to support Ukraine?
No, I can tell you that the initial reaction of Congress to Zelensky and the Ukrainian people fighting back against Putin just had universal support, Democrats and Republicans. I think back, you mentioned the Ukrainian caucus, and there were senators from the Republican side of the aisle anxious to be part of it as well. And then there was this turnaround when Trump started questioning whether we were spending too much money there. And it split the Republicans right down the center. And it's a shame. Many of them still held fast to their loyalty to Ukraine, but others walked away from it and said it was just too expensive and it was none of our business. I can't explain Secretary Rubio. I voted for him. There were 99 of us who voted for him in the hope that he would bring the values we've seen in his life to his new job. But he is facing an overwhelming political force in Donald Trump. And several times he's done things which I hoped he wouldn't.
I mean, the truth is, though, I mean, when it comes to Senator Rubio, Secretary Rubio, I mean, whether it's USAID, which he supported, whether it's Ukraine, which he supported, whether it's making sure that classified information wasn't put on an unclassified platform, which he believed in, he's it appears to me, at least, he's totally different than what he was when he served the United States Senate.
You're right, John, and there's no other way to put it. He is just doing things which were totally different than the position he took as senator from Florida. Think for a moment about the Gang of Eight, when we had 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans sit down for months. I was part of that group and write an immigration reform bill that was embraced by everybody, business, labor, farm workers, across the board, embraced by them and passed the Senate with, I think, 65 votes, if I remember correctly. He was part of that, but I could tell that as soon as it was publicly announced, he started backing away from it. He voted for it when it came to the floor, but he wouldn't support the effort to push it in the House, and it died. So I think he started having second thoughts about whether he was too liberal for the Republican Party when it came to that issue.
Yeah, maybe a little foreshadowing back in 2013 of what was to come, actually.
Yes.
So let's talk about you've been around a while. Before we get yeah, what the hell? We'll just go right here. So you've seen Congress change, whether it was your time in the House or whether it's your time in the Senate. Could you just talk about that a little bit, because it's been damn near a generation, or maybe even two. And can you talk about how it used to work, and talk about how it doesn't work now? Because quite honestly, so you know, for full disclosure, I'm a little pissed at my folks in the United States Senate, because I know they're not all bad people, but there's certainly letting a lot of bad shit happen without standing up and saying, "I want my voice to be heard." And that's kind of where I want to go with this. But I want to know what the good old days were like, Dick, when you first got there, and how things worked, and how it was like a finely oiled Singer sewing machine.
Well, let me tell you one, and you and I differed on this issue somewhat, but it's an indication of how an issue becomes law and what you can do about it. I happen to believe that the interchange fees or swipe fees on credit cards and debit cards was too high, and that retailers ended up being forced to pay it, and had no choice in the matter. Many times it was one of the most expensive items in their budget, in their retail budget. So I looked at the issue. I wasn't on the banking committee, but I thought it's a good issue. I'm gonna take a look at it. And I asked for a study, and the banks were opposed to me. They didn't want a study to see how much was actually being charged. You don't know what the interchange fee is or swipe fee is. It's built into your bill at the restaurant, and you don't see it. It's not on the check that you receive. So I called for this study, and the bank said, "No way, we're going to stop you. We won't let you do this." And we were facing the banking reform bill, the Dodd-Frank bill, and that was going to be my chance. So I kind of got my back up and said, "Well, if you don't want to study, then the hell with you. I'm going to regulate this fee. I'm going to have the Federal Reserve do it of all places," because I thought that was a neutral political site to do it. And so I crafted this amendment, not being a member of the banking committee, as the bill came to the floor. I was the 24th amendment on the list. 24 amendments, John. We haven't had 24 amendments in the Senate since then. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So the time came for my amendment, and Chris Dodd, who had mixed feelings about it, and Shelby, who had mixed feelings about it, said, "Well, for the 24th Amendment, unlike the previous 23, you need 60 votes to put that amendment on the bill." I said to Dodd, "What in the hell are you doing to me?" He said, "Well, that's the way it's going to be. Take it or leave it." And I said, "I'll take it." And we ended up with 64, 65 votes and passed that amendment. Think about that for a second, that we would have a bill on the floor as significant as that and 24 amendments being offered to it. I mean, that is unheard of today. The only time you get 24 amendments plus is for a votorama, which is kind of a symbolic thing. It isn't real law. But
Right.
that was the reality of the situation. What's happened, John, you saw it at the time that you were in the Senate. We stopped legislating. We started giving to the leaders in the Senate and the House, both parties, the power to sit down and write a bill. And then we begged, we went on bended knee and begged them, "Will you please include my amendment?" Think about the Durbin Amendment, as they call it, plus and minus. Uh, I didn't ask anybody's permission. I just filed it, and
Yep.
my time came, and I got a vote. That to me is what the Senate should be all about. And
Yeah.
because of our fear of the political danger of some amendments, we walked away from it.
And you also got a debate on that amendment, and which is
Yeah, we sure
very,
did.
very rarely happens in the United States Senate, if at all now. I mean, where you different sides talk about what's good and what's bad about, so the people can see the process unfold. Right now, there's nothing to see because, as you pointed out, the leadership is doing it, and that's not how it should be working.
And 60 vote requirements have become routine.
Yeah.
Routine. Filling the tree, 60 votes. Democrats did it, Republicans are doing it. I mean, to me, they're walking away from our constitutional responsibility and opportunity. I guess it's easy for me to say, coming from a blue state, that we ought to really open up the process. But I don't see any other way to make the Senate worthwhile.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact is that coming from a blue state, red state, purple state, it doesn't matter. Debate is a good thing. A deliberative body is what the Senate's supposed to be known for, and there's not a hell of a lot of deliberation that's going on these days. That is for
No,
damn.
there isn't, John. And since you left, and under this year's proceedings, we've had 15 or 16 weeks, straight weeks, with 1 or 2 week exceptions, one for Easter and one back in February. But we have been in session the whole time, filling up the nominations of Donald Trump. We have not carried the day on a single nomination. Every nomination, the Republicans have stuck together enough. One time they had to bring J.D. Vance in for the Secretary of Defense, but we have not done anything except approve those nominations after dragging the process out for days. It's unfortunate. I didn't vote for most of those, as you can imagine. But it seems like we're just spinning our wheels, wasting our time, staying in session late at night for no apparent reason.
Yeah, and I would also say this: the Constitution speaks of advice and consent. Advice and consent is made for both parties to make sure that the people that the president is nominating to his cabinet are fit for the position. It's not supposed to be a rubber stamp. It was never set up to be a rubber stamp, whether Republicans are in power or Democrats are in power. But yet, it seems as though that's the way it is these days.
It is. And John, I'll tell you, there have only been a half a dozen instances where Republican senators have broken with their majority. It takes extraordinary courage to do that these days. I think Elisa Murkowski, for example, I mean, she's an amazing story, and you know it well. I mean, she stared down a Republican primary, has really accepted the opportunity to be an independent voice representing Alaska, and I respect you so darn much for doing that.
Yeah, and as long as you brought up Lisa, we'll follow up a little bit on that. I mean, last week or so, maybe it's been 2 weeks ago now, she said that she's very fearful of retribution. It's not the first time I've heard that, by the way. I've heard that off the record. I happened to be in the airport here a couple months ago on a Thursday, and people were piling out, and they said some of the same stuff that they weren't going to Congress wasn't going to do anything about the problems that they see because they're afraid of retribution. And besides that, the courts will take care of it. Is there any truth to either one of those statements that retribution is something that people are very concerned about? And is it just political retribution or is it personal retribution?
Well, it could be personal. We've seen some terribly violent things threatened and some things executed, and there's no excuse on either political side for that to happen. But this fear factor, think of this, John. In my office in Chicago, in the federal building, people will literally knock on the door because the doors are all locked. And then they're greeted when they come in, and can we help you? Well, I just lost my job with a federal agency. Well, sit down, let's talk about it. Yes, I want to talk about it. What's your name? I don't want to give you my name. Well, what agency are we talking about? I don't want to tell you the name of the agency. I'm afraid of retribution in that situation. And you think to yourself, is this America? Are we talking about the United States of America? We've reached a point where we don't want to publicly talk about something that's a matter of public record. It's a reality. And the same thing is true with these senators and House members. They are scared to death that there's going to be a revenge factor by Donald Trump and the MAGA people that will cost them their seat. And they would rather just grit their teeth and ignore the reality. I call it the silence of the lambs. And that's happening every single darn day here.
I want to ask about but this is for both of you. You talk about how we don't have the debating and the legislating being done on the floor of the Senate. And I remember, as a journalist covering it, I would call the press secretaries and they'd say, well, whether it was McConnell or Schumer, they don't want to bring that to the floor because they don't have the votes. And I said, well, what do you mean? Bring it to the floor and let the senators vote on it. And then I had to pull up this book from Senator Dirksen and Senator Mansfield from both Montana and Illinois and how they worked together and how they got things done. And so I guess the question is, how do we get back to that? What can we all do to get back to that where you're actually debating bills on the floor of the Senate instead of letting leadership decide?
Well, I think what you need is a bipartisan force in the Senate, probably the House as well, but I want to focus on the Senate that just basically says we're willing to fight for it. Now, when I talk to Republican senators, they say that's exactly what we talk about in our caucus: is the fact that we no longer have an amendment process and no longer have debate, and we're sick of it. We want to see a change. I said, fine, count me in for a bipartisan force that's going to put me on the spot with a vote on the floor. That's why I ran for election, to be on the spot, and that's the way it should go. But currently, the Trump factor, the first 100 days, is overwhelming force within the Republican ranks. Think of how few people have broken ranks with him and call themselves Republicans still. Most of them who do are on their way to retirement. It's the only way they can work up the courage to do it.
Yeah, I think we've seen McConnell take some votes that you normally wouldn't see Mitch McConnell take, and I think Mitch is probably not going to run for reelection.
I
Unless,
think that's probably true, John. And in the meantime, a fellow named Mike Tackett, who was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune, is doing this long-term memoir of McConnell, and I think he's, with McConnell's permission, released a few facts that McConnell has said in the past he was going to break with Trump, and he's doing it now. Not as much as I'd like to see, but he's doing it every once in a while.
Senator Durbin, I want to ask you, I mean, I have so many questions for you, but let's talk a little bit about this movement and people trying to stand up to the Trump administration, whether you have Senator Cory Booker and his filibuster and the sit-in yesterday, or the Bernie AOC rallies, the fight, the oligarchy tours, or even Governor Walz going out and calling his rallies tea parties. I mean, what do you think needs to happen to help Democrats find a winning formula that kind of touches everybody, that keeps their progressive base, but also gathers the independent centrists they need, and even some, moderate Republicans?
Well, I will tell you that there is a political force that is building in this country. We see it in rallies in my hometown of Springfield, Illinois. 1,000 people will show up on a Saturday. In Chicago, 25, 30,000, not uncommon. So people have a lot of energy. They are opposed to what they see in the first 100 days. They're impatient, and they're impatient with me. Why aren't you doing more, Durbin? Well, I'm trying to do all I can legally, constitutionally, but I need more votes. I need more senators. I need more House members. And so I'm begging them that instead of marching in front of the homes of Democratic congressmen and senators, understand where a problem is, and it's across the aisle. And I think they're coming around. Not to take anything away from Cory Booker, a good friend of John's and mine too. What he is doing and what he's done is extraordinary. He's using the power of office to call attention to the problem, not solve the problem, because we still don't have the votes to do that, but to call attention to it. And that helps some people accept the fact that we're really trying. I don't doubt any lack of resolve among the Democrats when it comes to the political agenda, but we just don't have the opportunity because of the limited number of votes, and that's frustrating to say. Now, in terms of the message, that's a good point, and we've got to be honest about it. We turned out damn poor in a recent poll when people were asked if they think the Democrats are relevant to their lives with their message. We can do a heck of a lot better. And it means being honest among ourselves first, and then with the public about what our agenda can be and cannot be. There are certain things and ways we've done them in the past that'll never work in Montana. John can tell you that story. And there was a time when we had senators regularly representing your state. And now it's a much different world that we live in. So, I mean, let me take immigration, for example, an issue that I've kind of gone out on a limb on over 20 years. My starting point is this: we should never knowingly allow a dangerous person to come into this country, period. Secondly, if they're in this country seeking citizenship and they do dangerous things or threatening things, throw them out. That's simple. I think Democrats have got to start there. Now we can have a conversation about what about the rest of immigration? What do we need among our farmers? Well, the Farm Bureau comes to me, and as soon as the door is closed, they say they're desperate for farm workers to come in for dairy operations and orchard operations and the maintenance of farms. And they just don't have the people anymore that they once had. The same thing is true on the business side. Behind that swinging door in every restaurant is a room full of undocumented people who are working hard, probably using some phony social security number and making basic wages and glad to have it. And the restaurateurs know that. McDonald's knows that. Everyone knows that. But we aren't looking at the reality of the situation. So I think we've got to sit down and say, first, security. We agree with the Republicans on the premise dangerous people shouldn't be here. But when it comes to immigration, we've got to have a thoughtful approach to it. And I think that would be a much better way to do it.
Yeah, we've had a number. I don't know when the last immigration bill passed. You talked about the one you worked on with the Gang of Eight back in 2013, but it's been a good number of decades since we've updated the immigration bill in this country. But it does need to start with secure borders. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, we can't equivocate on that. And I think that's the reality. And if the word goes out around the world, uh, we're not playing games on that score. A lot of people won't try to come in here. That's the way it should be.
I want to ask you about the DNC vice chair's PAC that announced $20 million to primary what it calls ineffective, out of touch Democrats. What are your thoughts on that? What would that effort do to the future of the Democratic Party?
It's like Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized political party. I'm a Democrat. And I think we're naive to believe that people are going to give us 100% loyalty to incumbents or to any group of politicians. We're always going to have a voice and a force in our political party, if it's alive and well, that says we want to do it a little differently. I've seen that throughout my life. John, seen it. You have too. And there's nothing wrong with that. But this notion that simply because you're a certain age, you shouldn't be part of the game. I have two words for those people: Bernie Sanders. He's 83 years old and with AOC touring the country with massive rallies of people who are coming forward wanting to be part of the progressive movement in this country. And, you know, that's a healthy thing. Now, in terms of challenges within the party, I don't have to worry about that chapter in my life any longer. But if it had reached that point, that's fine. You know, I'm not happy to have a primary, but if that's what it takes, I'll face it. You know, that's part of the reality of public life.
Yeah, it must be the water in Vermont, don't you think?
That could be it.
It's got to be something. I mean, Leahy was doing pretty well, and I hope he's still doing well when he was in there. And now you got Bernie, and geez, I think the junior senator's in his mid 70s, right?
Oh,
Wow.
that kid, that kid, Peter Welch. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Senator Durbin, I have to ask you about this because I know our time is limited, but you listed all of these accomplishments that you're proud of in your resignation announcement, including, and I would love to know more about this, putting an end to smoking on airplanes. I am so curious about the fight that went down over that one. But it really struck me that a lot of these accomplishments that you listed are currently under attack by DOGE and the Trump administration, like expanding NIH research and environmental protections, diversity. How is that affecting you to watch all of this happen after your decades in Congress?
Well, it worries me. It angers me in some respects. Medical research, for God's sake. I put together a little group. Patty Murray, who's always great on the subject. Roy Blunt, who was the Republican senator, conservative Republican senator from Missouri, and chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee. And when he was here, Lamar Alexander. The four of us said, let's set out to try to get 5% real growth in healthcare research every year. So we ended up increasing the budget for the NIH by 60% in a 10-year period of time. 60%. And it meant a lot of projects, as Dr. Collins said to me at NIH, we're going to light up the scoreboard. We're so close in so many different areas. And it created hope and opportunity, and researchers believed they would have a job waiting for them next year, too. So they were inspired to stick with the job. Now comes the Trump administration and Elon Musk and basically says, that's not important anymore. Research isn't important in so many areas, but in medical research. And you think to yourself, They are so out of touch with reality. If you have ever been in a doctor's office and a diagnosis comes in that scares the living hell out of you for yourself or the family that you love, the first question you're going to ask him is there anything, any new drug, any new surgery, any new procedure that gives me hope? And they're going to try to find, well, in the extreme, it's a clinical trial or there is a new drug. That's exactly what all of us are hoping for. And to cut down the medical research in this area is so mindless. And it just angers me when I think of these people who are desperately hoping that someone they love can overcome a medical challenge.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? I mean, and like COVID, it ain't a lot of these problems aren't going to get solved by drinking bleach. That's for damn.
No, I
You
hope
know,
not.
no. I mean, it drives me crazy that we've got a guy that's the head of HHS that doesn't believe in vaccinations. It doesn't believe in any of the things that has helped keep this country the greatest country on earth. Truthfully.
Well, I'm going to read this myself so I remember the details, but I read something in an Irish newspaper yesterday on the airplane, and they likened RFK Jr. to, and his views of medicine and science to Caligula's horse. And if you look in history, the story of Caligula's horse, if I remember correctly, Caligula reached the point where he said his horse was smart enough to make decisions based on how many times he would hit the floor. So I think that's a good analogy. I'm going to look up that story to be sure.
One last headline to ask you about. You're the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, oversees the DOJ. What do you make of Attorney General Pam Bondi making comments about prosecuting judges who go against the will of Trump on immigration?
Well, I was worried about that because she is a gifted, talented, experienced attorney. She's not a stumble bum who came into this situation and is looking around with what to do. She knows what to do. Unfortunately, she's doing it for the wrong reasons. I mean, she should be protecting our Constitution, number one, but her number one priority is loyalty to Donald Trump. And the things that we face now really challenge the basis of our constitutional democracy. The bottom line is that founding document was written in a way so that there's accountability for everyone. And when it comes to the president, there's impeachment as an opportunity, but it's not going to happen with the current alignment of votes. And secondly, there are the orders of the court, which we are all bound to follow. And I started asking the question 6 weeks ago in the committee of all the nominees in the Department of Justice. If do you believe that a public official can defy a court order? And instead of saying no, which is the obvious answer, some of them started equivocating at the highest levels. And I thought, I'm afraid they're scared to death. That's exactly what Trump is going to do. And Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has been really setting the stage for that to happen. I hope it doesn't. It'll be the most serious constitutional crisis since the Civil War. I think it's that important.
Checks and balances will be effectively gone, done.
Gone.
Yep.
Absolutely, John.
Yep. It's pretty crazy. Look, Dick Durbin, we promised you, at least we kind of did that. I think we've been on this for a little longer than what we promised, but I just want to say thanks. One thing you didn't bring up on interchange that I think I need to is that because of you, I got elected in 2018. And I just want to thank you because of that issue. Because you went to the floor and you were talking about bankers and you were talking about interchange. And I followed that with, because I was on the other side of the issue, and I followed that with, do I look like a banker? And Durbin, that's what put me across the line in 2018. I just want you to know that because everybody knew that I did look like a banker, right?
Yes.
One of my favorite lines in the United States Senate, John Tester looking up at the gallery saying, "Do I look like a banker?" Yeah.
Dick Durbin, you're a gentleman and just one hell of a fine senator, and I just want to say thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks, John and Maritza. Thank you. Thank you very much as well. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Senator. Have a great day.
And sure.
We'll do it. I'll do it.
Good conversation. Wow, we covered a lot.
Yeah, you dealt with the meat and potatoes, I dealt with the bullshit, so it was good, you
Yeah, but
know?
people wanna hear the bullshit. I mean, people wanna hear you guys shoot the shit, I think. I'm a nerd, but I think that's interesting.
That's good, that's good.
Okay, so final thoughts. I mean, it's so fascinating to see, I don't know, just the thought process that goes through his head, Senator Jeanne Shaheen's head, all of these people saying, "Okay, it's time to step away," and to wonder what that looks like, what any of this looks like as we contemplate what comes next for us as America.
Well, the fact of the matter is Durbin is a lawyer by training, which is a benefit, is in the United States Senate, and he believes in debate, and he believes in taking votes, and if you win, you win. If you lose, you move on. And that's simply not what's gone on in the Senate for a long, long, long time, including most of my years there. And and Durbin's going to be hard to replace because of the institutional memory that he has. He's he's really somebody that understands the process because of the time that he's had in both the House and the Senate. And he's somebody that I think that most people in the Senate, regardless of political leanings, look up to and value his opinion. And that will be gone, by the way, which was, as I said in the beginning, uh, the right decision for him to make because he needs to spend some time with his family. And he's been in public service for a long, long time, certainly paid his dues and did a great job in that process.
Yeah, it's incredible, but I think about even, as a viewer of the process, I mean, the great moments in history, I will never get the image of John McCain, Senator John McCain, walking up and doing the thumbs down on, the Affordable Care Act, and those are the great dramatic moments in our country's history, and it just doesn't feel like we have a lot of those anymore.
Yeah, it'd be great, and by the way, it'd be a hell of a lot more fun for the folks who are serving back there if you're able to have those good debates and be able to hammer it out and, have amendments to bills and change them and make them better or make them worse depending on your perspective, and let the process work. The forefathers had it right, and, we ought to be paying attention to, the way they intended it to be, and we should try to get back to that for sure. It doesn't work to have all the power in the executive branch, and it doesn't work to have all the powers in the leaders' hands of the House and the Senate either. And so it really is an opportunity to get the system back the way it used to be. And I think the country and this people of this country would benefit from that greatly.
So let's get to a little bit of viewer feedback, listener feedback. I'm so stuck in TV mode sometimes. Um, we had a doctor write us with huge concerns about Medicaid and Medicare cuts and what that will do to hospitals. And so I just want to say to that doctor, we will talk about that in a future episode, but definitely something to watch as they go forward with the budget in the next few weeks. And then we had another listener write, and
I just stop you for a second?
please,
You forward his comments to me, and I happen to be on the tractor, and I told you I had auto steer, so all I have to do is change corners, and if everything's working good. And I spent about 80 acres writing him an email back, and he's very, very involved, very, very committed to make sure that a lot of the things in healthcare don't go away, like our hospitals, both rural and urban. I might add, urban from a Montana perspective, and really is out there doing because he wrote me back, and
good.
he's doing some really, really good work, and I applaud that. And more people need to be active, and he is very active, and it's good. And we will deal with those healthcare issues in another session because they're really important to Montana and they're important to the whole country. Because quite frankly, if you don't have access to healthcare, it really makes life expectancy a heck of a lot shorter. So we'll be talking about those issues some more.
It doesn't do much for the economy in a lot of those communities either, if you lose
Right
power.
on. Healthy workforce is important. So, yep.
We had one other listener write, and they just wanted to express to you that they really miss you in Montana. She says, quote, "We are stuck between a rock and a very hard place. At our next protest, we are taking a sign with your name on it." That's Carolyn from Spotify.
There we go, Carolyn. Yeah, well, that's cool. Look, I mean, I think that making sure people's opinions are heard are really important. I think the president stating that these people are paid out there to raise hell is really they're underestimating what's really going on out there. There's a lot of folks, a lot of them are Democrats, but there's a lot of them that are Republicans, and certainly a lot of independents that are out there trying to make their voices heard. And it would behoove the folks that are in elected office to listen to them and try to address some of their concerns, because I think some of their concerns are very, very, very valid.
I worked in Kalispell, Montana when the Tea Party movement broke out. I covered my first Tea Party up there, and it was a huge movement, and it took over street corners, I mean, for a very long time, and I never heard then President Obama say that they were paid or
A lot of these movements are grassroots movements. I think what's going on right now is entirely grassroots. There is not big money behind it. Thank God. I think they're just folks that are concerned. And I think, we ought to really do a podcast on campaign finance too, Maritza, because
let's
truth,
get that done.
a lot of the problems out there that we're seeing today, a lot of the paralysis that we're seeing in the United States Senate is due a lot to the campaign finance. I mean, the fact that the president had Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, walking around cutting off programs with a huge wallet. He went to Wisconsin and said he was giving out millions of dollars to people who would vote a certain way, which is, by the way, totally illegal. But right now, our campaign finance system is screwed up because of Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court back in 2010 that we're living with all that fallout today. We ought to really get into that. I got some good folks we could probably get on to talk
That's what
about
I was
this.
gonna ask you. Who's your dream guest to talk about campaign finance?
It'd be Tiffany Muller from End Citizens United. She's been working on this stuff for a long, long, long time, and she knows it inside and out. Not a partisan organization. Very, very, very much just want to fix the problem because she sees the big money and interest running the country, and that's what we're seeing right now, and it's because of campaign finance.
And we'll continue to make our public plea to get Senator Lisa Murkowski on the podcast as well. But we do have a former Trump staffer on our show next week. We have Olivia Troy, who actually served under Vice President Mike Pence. So we will talk with Olivia next week. And before I let you get back on the tractor, you are wearing a T-shirt that says, "I'm here because you broke something." But what does your hat say?
Oh, my hat is very, 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 very fisherman. It's a Trout Unlimited hat. It's a TU hat.
Aha.
I mean, it's springtime. I mean, people got to start thinking about doing the fun things that you do outdoors.
Is your T-shirt, is this something that people broke related to the farm, or are you talking about something different?
No, it all has to. Well, I don't know. Maybe I should be talking about something different. I actually, this is what I wear when I'm out in the field. I throw on two shirts because it's kind of chilly outside, and this happened to be the shirt that came up. I didn't even pick it out. I was gonna
Oh,
potentially put on a flannel one over the top of it, but not to be.
well, I was going to say, two T-shirts, you might be warmer with a flannel or a jacket. I'm just gonna put that advice
And
in.
but here's the deal. I got like 8,000 t-shirts, and this thing will be covered with grease and dirt and everything else by the time tonight shows up. So I got
Alright.
those flannel ones for special occasions. You know what I mean?
That's right. Those are your fancy clothes now.
Heck yes, that's to going to town and having a beer shirt.
All right. We want to say thank you so much to our guest, Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, to our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music, to all of you, our listeners. You can find us on Blue Sky, Instagram, Substack, and YouTube. And you can shoot us an email anytime at groundedpcast@gmail.com. We will talk again soon.
Hell